Everyone in crypto is missing these important charts. These charts show a much bigger picture, a much bigger cycle at play here. And I think right now we are in our own bubble, particularly us altcoin holders. We're only thinking short term. Now, importantly, many of us are beginning to think more long term in terms of macro cycles. But I've got charts that show correlations, inverse correlations, comparisons to much larger sort of cycles and also individual commodities, and a whole lot more, just to show you that actually what's playing out here is so much better than what we could possibly have ever expected. That's not to give you the daily dose of hopium, by the way. I understand that we want to be bullish right now. We want to make money. But I believe, we do have to start with a bit of caution, but I believe many people are quitting this race way too soon. We're going to get into this here, first of all, from Colin. But before we do, guys, do not forget, if you find yourself enjoying this content or you appreciate how much time it takes to collect this information and package it in a single video for you, you can help support all I do. It makes me definitely smile in the morning with a like and subscribe for your own benefit as well. Now, as Colin says here, I myself am also receiving a lot of questions about when altcoins will pump. For the most part, altcoins will not pump single-handedly with global liquidity. They will ride the wave with Bitcoin. Bitcoin will definitely benefit from global liquidity. We've seen the correlations there because Bitcoin is a different type of asset to altcoins. Altcoins are just digital gambling coins. That's all it really is. That's just as simple as I can possibly put it. And even to some degree, Ethereum is viewed with that lens for many of these big institutional players. So yes, they will ride up, but what we're waiting for here is alt season. And alt season can only come from, like Colin says, and like Ben Cohen has also been at the forefront of saying, I do agree with this, is that we need to end QT ideally. Okay, Bitcoin can pump in QT, but I believe alts can only really pump in neutral. All right, so monetary policy is pretty much stagnant. And also, ideally in QE, I mean, 2017's bull run we had a neutral period there, and we actually had a massive bull run. So we don't necessarily need it for alt season, but it is ideal. And the good news is this is likely ending in the next couple months. Now, one other way we can look at this as well is with stablecoins. Of course, the stablecoin market cap going up is a great sign. Why? Because essentially that's people parking money in crypto, ready to inject it into mainly altcoins. And this is going up. Right now, we're at a total market cap for stablecoins at $230 billion. Now, we're actually much higher than the previous cycle, but actually at the all-time high in the previous cycle where altcoins peaked, we're almost double that. Now, importantly, this blue line here is global liquidity, okay? Now, it's overlaid on having a look at the comparison with USDT and USDC versus the rest of the market, okay? The rest of the market including Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? And you can see here that's inversely correlated, meaning that when global liquidity goes up, altcoins come down and vice versa. What does this mean? This is obviously a telltale sign that obviously stablecoins, being a derivative of fiat currency, the US dollar, that when global liquidity goes up and people go risk on, people go into Bitcoin and mainly even again into alts as they do follow, they obviously sell and trade off their stablecoins. When this peaks, we can assume at some point when global liquidity goes up and this comes down, that money will flow into altcoins. Just to paint the picture, I mean, right now we're sitting at under an 800 billion market cap for altcoins. And in the past, in the previous cycle, we topped out at 1.13 trillion. So as I said before, I think we'll go to maybe around, if not more than $2 trillion market cap for alts. But like I said, stable coins actually going up here is a very good sign indeed for altcoins in general, because that shows confidence in the altcoin market. If stable coins were going down and they weren't being minted, then that is a sign that the larger investors who print most of this and just the average person in general is not using stable coins, because obviously, as we know, most of stable coins in this case are used within the ecosystem for DeFi or for buying smaller altcoins and so on. I guess for you guys at home trying to pay attention to what may come next for altcoins is just observing the macro market. As we know, this is the most important thing. Everything else regarding crypto, I think fundamentally is in good standings right now. The only reason we aren't, let's say, higher in terms of the chart I'm going to show you here in a second, we could be higher, right, is because of things like this. Obviously, the war's been going on for a while, but of course, it would be good for this to fizzle down and ideally stop, and there is talk for this to happen. This will be fantastic for markets. Again, markets like certainty, but most important, markets like positivity, okay? The certainty can come from an exhaustion like this with these tariffs, right? Because ultimately, tariffs aren't positive, at least initially. I mean, depending on how things are played, of course, but they can be digested, and markets can digest things over the course of time. I think right now, I mean, Trump, yesterday, for example, spoke about incorporating more tariffs here. April 2nd, he's going to add and double down on the tariffs, I think, to Mexico and I believe Canada. Okay. And this is bad, but markets are getting used to his game. Okay. So these tariffs coming online, the markets are actually pricing in him to dissolve them a day before they go into effect as he uses them for bargaining chips. So it's just this kind of repetition where markets get used to, because guys, guess what? Markets obviously are just people versus people. If people sell, they sell out of a fear that other people will think they should sell based on fear. Does that make sense? It's almost why people talk about self-fulfilling prophecies. But what is real and what is serious is observing the business cycle, because the business cycle is a pulse, essentially, on how an economy is performing. If consumers, if businesses within an economy are in expansion in terms of they are willing and have the capital to buy things, whether it's money for a loan, to buy a new shopping complex, whatever it may be, then that, of course, is going to bring up this particular score here. The business cycle will indicate that economy is an expansion. So when you see the United States over here, bordering on expansion for the last 12 months, this is actually a good sign as long as this actually does go up. I think that's what the tariffs may possibly hinder. The tariffs, of course, will make it more difficult for people to want to buy, right? It's inflationary. And you have a look at oil, and actually it's even in a worse position because most of the world is actually in contraction. So, of course, this is, I think, one of the most important indicators for alt season. True alt season will really come when everyone is splurging, when they have money to go, I've got an extra $100 this week from work. I've bought everything I want to buy. I've had enough shopping. I'm going to go and throw some money on Fartcoin. Now, the chart I need you to digest today is this. Please understand it. Pause the video if need be. I'm going to make these charts available in the private community as well. Most importantly, just share screenshots or this video to people you want to know. This is so important. This blew my mind today. Guys, what we're observing here, we'll look at the first chart here first. This is essentially the fair value of Bitcoin versus the current price. And what I've got here, this middle line, you can barely see it. It's kind of like green, right? This green middle line here is that very fair value. And what you're looking at is the deviation bands in the different colors around it. Now, why this is important is because this gives us a far better idea of how these cycles work from a fair price perspective, and also through the lens of true absolute highs to absolute lows, right? True reversal points. What am I talking about here? Well, to cut a long story short, I think that this proves that the previous cycle, the 2021 cycle, was an absolute schmozzle. And what we're experiencing right now was always a part of the plan, especially as we've now moved into the more adopted bull run, where we now literally have banks custodying crypto for the intention of holding it for a reserve. And also, we are syncing ourselves up to much larger macro cycles. It makes sense that this was always going to be a slower process. And here's what I'm talking about. I really need you to pay attention to this. Now, the key thing is these gray dotted lines here. These gray dotted lines essentially show you the point at the absolute high. So right here, that sort of reversal point from going up to now going down, and the sort of low here from going down to going up again each and every single time. This is, I believe, the true cycle high and true cycle low. Now, these deviation bands are all built again around the market value to realized value, or MBRV. Very reliable and I think undervalued tool to use here, analyzing the fair value of Bitcoin. And it's over a 2-year window, rolling window, which means it takes the last 2-year price action and basically kind of analyzes it versus the current price action. So when you see these bands contract, come in, like you can see down here for these reversals, right before the massive swing, okay? This is where price has slowly started to become less volatile. So, sort of balance out, at least versus the previous price action, okay? When these begin fanning out here, that's when price is very, very volatile, swing high, come down underneath it and so on. It was very, very volatile. You can see high, 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 cuts down very quickly, high, 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 cuts down very quickly. And so that's, of course, a sign that we're in a bear market. And a quick little point of reference actually as well is that this band over here, this chart, actually has a very similar thing. You can see after each bull run just how much that these deviation bands as well really fan out and how much they really hyper contract here right before that bull run kicks in. Okay, they kind of coincide with each other over here. All right, again, similar thing happened also over here and also over here right before things got really hectic. And it's a great way to also observe, as many people do, whether the price of Bitcoin or any asset is over or undervalued. So essentially, to cut a long story short, the reason and the main thing I want to bring up in this video is that this, again, gives us a fairer idea of the cycle playing out. You can see here, this is back in the 2017 all-time high, and this is back in 2015, all right, so the lows. Now, one notable thing was it took from the low, from that change in direction to the actual change all-time high direction at the top here, it took 1,100 days. That's quite a long time. That's about 3 years or so. Now, if you have a look in the 2021 cycle, this was a wild card. This really shows things, this really shows why things were different this time around. From this swing low, okay, so from when it kind of went and it went from, sort of this going down to going up again to this change in direction at the top, it was only 656 days. Now, I know that's not the all-time high, right? We're not talking about the actual price all-time high, but it's a way to look at things here through steady overall price, okay? And again, it was literally about a whole entire year less than what it should have been, at least based on the previous cycle. Now, going into the idea that we're having these lengthening cycles, why was this different? Why wasn't it a much longer cycle? The reason being is because of this. The pandemic. The pandemic shot us down quickly, and overstimulation brought us into this quick, and I believe this shouldn't have happened, this first all-time high. So people get this idea about, selling in May and going away. This whole idea about selling May, go away, that never existed before the previous cycle. That's just because it was artificially pumped over here, and this all-time high actually shouldn't have been the all-time high. And the reason being is because we were brought down prematurely from the Signature Bank and all those banking collapses in the United States, paired with FTX going down, Luna crashing, BlockFi, Celsius, the crypto and the global markets went bang all of a sudden, bringing us right down very soon. So it gave us confidence too soon, therefore making this hump come up much faster, and it came down much faster than expected as well, also pulling us down much faster. So again, it's just looking, essentially, to cut a long story short, it's looking at the gradual flow of the market rather than the immediate and highly volatile price action. So we're drawing a lot more comparisons to, I think, the 2017 cycle, which I believe was a normal cycle, and how this cycle should have played out as well. And again, we would have been on a much better obvious trajectory right now, like I do point out in this particular tweet, had this not happened. I believe something like this would have happened. We would have peaked a little bit after this, probably around 100K, slightly after, come down, and that same double hump would have happened again, because as you can see here from this chart, we typically have a couple humps at the very, very beginning of each bull run. Now, you can see here, I've kind of highlighted those humps in these sort of red circles here. We actually broke above this deviation band, this rainbow band, once and twice over here as well. Again, this also shows here, if I get my pen out, once, twice, indicating it's being overbought basically, and also once and twice. We would have had the same thing play out over here, of course, as well. This was looking quite juicy over here. You can see we actually had a bit of a red pump over here. I believe, again, it should have been something like this. We have, would have pumped again, basically. But, things didn't play out, and I think this is the main reason why people are fundamentally, confused, because based on last cycle, we should have been pumping, but they forget that we were artificially pumping last cycle prematurely. And so what does this all mean? Well, again, going off the fact that we do have lengthening cycles, well, we're pretty much about here right now, back in, that's a very, very poor straight line. Maybe this will do a better job. We're pretty much back here right now in the 2017 cycle, okay? But not quite, because again, lengthening cycles. So technically speaking, we're probably more akin to back over here. We're pretty much less than 50% the way through the cycle. And if you actually have a look at some other things like gold, as well as I'll show you here in a second, gold and gold ETF, akin to when Bitcoin had its ETF launch, actually things are playing out very similar as well, indicating that yes, we probably do have 50% more to still go. Now, this band over here only goes up to 1,012 days. And again, I would assume we have at least the same as this, so probably at least 1,100 days in total. Right now, we're sitting at about 517 days. So we have, again, as I said, over 50% the way to still go. But that doesn't mean that we'll end sometime over here in July of 2026. Again, that is that sort of reversal high based on this, which means that we could have, something like this play out. We come down, and then the rolling bands indicate that high again, like this and like this and like this, a few months after, maybe even 3 or 4 months, half a year after. So very important to understand this, guys. One other reason why I think we're in a bear market is because we don't have these massive fans after price goes up insanely. People feel like prices come up quite a lot. Even over here, price relative to the last 2 years was still quite steady. Hence, the bands weren't fanning out a lot. So if I pull up the MBRB deviation bands over here, and I make it look a little bit more presentable for you guys, you can see that we actually didn't have a massive fan out. A little bit, but nothing like actual bull runs. As a matter of fact, the score here in the MVRV score wasn't even above a score of 4. Now, we're actually contracting again now, which I believe is a good sign to see. Not only that, but we're actually extremely oversold, okay? We're at the blue line right now. This is where the big money is made, in my opinion, right? Right here at the blue line. You have a look at history, guys. Price only goes blue, really, at the end of a bull run. You can see here, actually, it didn't even happen in COVID. COVID didn't even pull us down to that point. You can see back over here after the 2017 cycle. Doesn't happen often, guys. And so this is where true money makers are made. The last time we were here was back in 2022. So it's, again, you buy when people are fearful, okay, and you sell when people are greedy. Had you followed this MVRV chart, again, you would have been selling up here in mass greed. So that's my opinion on the cycle, is looking at through a much longer term trend, which I believe is much more accurate than price action. And when we have a look here as well, back in 2015, 2017, so that same time period here that I highlighted to you before, these sort of gray bands, roughly speaking, you can see again, we're following this ascending channel in which we're following right now as well. It's just so many similarities. It's very, very hard not to consider. There are also a lot of comparisons being made as well to gold and Bitcoin, particularly around when gold launched its ETF in the early 2000s to where Bitcoin is, of course, right now. You can see they both had their ETF launch respectively here, gold's in this orange color, and they've actually followed a very, very similar pattern to one another. Obviously, not exactly the same, but the general trend has been the same. And interestingly, if I pull up, this is gold's chart here from the ETF, if I add a fib retracement here from roughly speaking around where we are at the moment, just before the GFC occurred, okay, we get a fib level of 2.618, which is roughly speaking the all-time high. Now, going back to Bitcoin, you can see here, if I draw the same fib retracement at roughly the same time of the 2008 GFC, we get something like $224,000 roughly at the 2.618 fib extension level. I said retracement, I mean extension level. So I'm not saying that this is going to obviously play out. This is definitely more so towards your hopium side of things. But some of the comparisons, particularly around the chart and how the chart's playing out, again, you shouldn't look at this as a definite thing. It's anything could pop up. It's definitely different. But I think some of these comparisons can kind of amount to you having maybe some more belief that maybe the cycle is supposed to occur, just, of course, on a longer time frame here than what we expected before. This is truly the adoption bull run, and we haven't really had any negative news. We're completely at the whim of macro news, but this just makes me so much more bullish because I don't think it's quite over just yet for the macro world, and I know crypto will hold its part besides the bloody manipulation that we've experienced in the last few months. I think crypto will hold its part. Matter of fact, the manipulators, I do think, will actually come to our aid because these guys want to make big money. They'll want to pump the bags. I just hope all of my viewers are wise enough to take profits on the way up. Some more similarities here, looking at now total 3 minus USDT. So all altcoins apart from Bitcoin, Ethereum, and USDT versus Bitcoin. Again, this just shows the strength of Bitcoin over the 3 interim years between alt seasons. And you can see right now we're experiencing the same exact event that occurred over here with this chart, this sort of relationship with Bitcoin versus alts all those years ago, except it's happening on a much longer time frame. This happened the equivalent of back here pretty much 12 months ago versus now where it is. So like I said, could that possibly mean we have something similar to this play out, again, over the next 12 months? Well, of course, charts like this would also support something like that. So, again, I hope you guys understand things are very similar through fear and greed, through rolling band charts, to the MVRV charts, right through to, of course, even gold and gold's ETFs to this cycle. Things are different, but I think things are different in a good way, in a better way, in a beneficial way. This could be the super cycle many of us have anticipated, but I actually do think, looking into these charts today, that it's more got to do with just the traditional cycles playing out, lengthening, of course, over time, and now we're synchronized to macro markets. Thank you so much. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.